mimicry in relation with the post-colonial literature, or in reference to the writings of the post-colonial era. The mimicry, this term especially refers to the people, the colonizers, the how the colonizers use their language, race, politics, and the colonized people, how they imitate colonized, for example, the Indians or the Africans, the colonized people, how they imitate the language, race, politics, and cultural attitude of the colonizers. Right? So this is called mimicry according to the post-colonial reference. Then there is a next term is hybridity. In general, we know that hybridity is what, when we are mixing the two breeds. In general, we know that it is a hybridity. But in the sense of post-colonial literature, it is a what we call a space between the burden, between the colonizers, how burdened the people, the colonized people, and how the colonized people carries the burden and meaning of culture. So this is a hybridity. This is a cross breeding of the colonizers and colonized. This is called hybridity. So we know that. So in this sense, these terms are used in the background topic: Homi Baba's nation and narration, liminality, mime and mimicry, and hybridity. So all we know that the shadow line by Amitav Ghosh has used the narrative technique. So Amitav Ghosh in this novel unfolded the various experience he has seen, or he has what we could say, that he has seen his own life, or he has listened or borrowed from the another characters. So these were the background topics of this novel. Then we will move to the author, Amitav Ghosh. He is the well-known author of the post-colonial era. He born on 11 July 1956 at Calcutta. He belongs to a Hindu family. He completed his education in Delhi, in various states. Even he studied in abroad, and then he started working as a professor in the various universities. Even he worked in the Oxford University, and then for his contribution to the literature, for his contribution, the government of India has awarded him with the Padma Shri in 2007. And he became the first writer in English to be conferred the Bharatiya Jnanpith Award for his contribution in the Indian literature, being a English writer. His first novel is The Circle of Reason, which was published in 1986. The second novel, which we are going to discuss, The Shadow Lines, in 1988. The third one, The Glass Palace, in 2000, and his famous trilogy, Ibis trilogy. He's also well known for this trilogy. So this was all about the Amitav Ghosh. He was a very prolific writer, and very beautifully he has narrated the historical incidents in India in this novel, uh, The Shadow Lines. Before we discuss the novel in detail, first of all, we need to understand the characters. Then only we can understand the interrelation of the characters and the plot. So, when we talk about the characters of this novel, The Shadow Line, the main character is Tridip, who is the protagonist of the novel, and he pursues a PhD in archaeology. And the main incident in novel is that this character Tridib is killed in a riot. So we know that India was facing the partition issue, the communal riots, and Tridib is one of the victim of those communal riots. Then the next character is Thamma. Thamma is a narrator's grandmother. The author, Amitav Ghosh, has not given a name to the narrator, so the narrator is unknown in this novel. Thamma is a narrator's grandmother, and this story revolves around these two characters, Thamma and her younger sister Maya Devi. The next is narrator, who is anonymous. We don't know his name, but he's narrating this novel, and he is talking about the characters in the novel. He recounts a series of stories and memories. So he's talking about the memories of Tridib, Ila, May, Nick, and he's unfolding the memories of these characters throughout this novel. The next character is Ela, the center of attraction of the novel. Ela is a narrator's cousin, and narrator has a feeling for Ela, for his cousin. And of course, Ela is Tridib's niece, because Ela is a daughter of Tridib's brother called Jatin, and she is a daughter of Jatin and Queen Victoria. Her mother's name is Queen Victoria. This is a character's name actually, and then she lives in London, and she knows very luxurious life. She is not aware of the tradition and cultures of India. Especially Thamma neglected Ela. Thamma did not like Ela because of her free nature, the way she lived in London, and she's trying to live as well in India like that. Then the next character is May. May is Mrs. Price's daughter, and she's a sister of Nick, and she loves to play orchestra, but actually she's playing it for the survival. She did not like it very much, but she has to earn something for her living. She is playing an orchestra. She her beloved of Tridip, and a witness communal riots. So when the Tridip was killed in a riot, at that time May was there. May was present. They were traveling in the same car, and Tridib and May, they were in a relationship. Soon they were going to confess their love for each other. But before that, the communal riots, the people in the riots killed Tridib. Then the next character is Nick, who is a brother of May Price and Ela's husband. At the end of the novel, we came to know that the Ela has an attraction for Nick, but on the same side, narrator has an attraction for Ela, but Ela is totally in love with Nick, and at the end, she marries with the Nick. But during the novel, as the novel progresses, we came to know that Nick is not a good boy, and Nick always mingled with the other girls, and he is not very much in love with the Ela. Then the next female character, the main female character, is Maya Devi. Maya Devi is a narrator's grandmother, Thamma, her sister. Already I told you, Maya Devi is the sister of Thamma, younger sister, and she marries Sahib. So the name of the character, her husband's name is Sahib, and Sahib is a son of Justice Datta Chaudhary. And Maya Devi and Sahib, they have three children, three sons, Tridib, Jatin, and Ruby. So these two characters, Tridib and Ruby, killed in a communal riots. So Maya Devi is also a victim of the communal riots, the way she lost her two sons. Then the next character is the Sahib, who is the husband of Maya Devi and son of Justice Datta Chaudhary. So Maya Devi and Sahib, these are the parents of these three sons, Tridi, Jatin, and Ropi. Okay, I hope you understood the characters in nutshell. It will help you to understand the plot as well. Now we will move to the plot of the novel, how the novel goes on, and how the character, or how beautifully the novelist has characterized the different experiences in this novel. The Shadow Line, which was published in 1988, is the Sahitya Akademi Award winning novel written by renowned English writer Amitav Ghosh. Right? And he is one of the most celebrated authors of Indian English and has won so many national and international awards for his writing. The novel Shadow Lines is set against the background of historical events. It is set against the historical events. So the events are like Swadeshi movement, the Second World War, partition of India, communal rights of 1963 to 1964, which was happened in Dhaka and Calcutta, the Maoist movement, and India-China war, India-Pakistan war, fall of Dhaka from East Pakistan, and creation of Bangladesh. So all these historical events are in the background of the novel. Okay, it gave honor to the writer. So how beautifully he has described all these events in the novel. In the year 1989, the novel was declared Sahitya Akademi Award for English in 1989. And the novel becomes famous when a person, Shalini Topiwala, she translated this work into Gujarati in 1998. This novel, Shadow Line, is a fine example of narration. This is a fine example of narration. It is a story of the family and friends of the nameless narrator who grew up in Kolkata, who is educated in Delhi and follows with the experiences he gets in London. So this is a journey from Calcutta, Delhi, London. His narration, the narrator, unknown narrator, his narration informs about his grandmother Thamma and his other relatives through the memories of his uncle and his grandmother. So he's giving us the picture through the narration he received from his uncle and grandmother. The events in the novel revolves around Maya Devi's family. Already I told you Maya Devi is a victim of the communal riot. Their friendship and their English friend prizes, Nick and May. These are the two children of Mrs. Prizes who lives in London. Maya Devi is a narrator's grandmother's sister. I told you Maya Devi is a sister of Thamma, and Thamma is a grandmother of narrator. It also centers Thamma. The novel also centers on Thamma, narrator's grandmother, and she is very attached to her ancestral village, ancestral city Dhaka. And very beautifully, the novelist Amitav Ghosh has interwoven the past, present, and future in the novel. The novel begins with the novel. The novel begins with Am I audible? Yeah. The novel begins with the narrator's recalling his memory to his cousin Ela. So the narrator, unknown narrator, he is recalling, he's telling his memory to his cousin Leela. Already I told you that he has a feeling for his cousin Leela. And his uncle Roby in London in the early 1980s. The unnamed narrator recounts a series of stories and memories. The stories and memories belong to narrator. His uncle Tridip, his uncle, narrator's uncle Tridip, and his grandmother Thamma. Though narration he goes back to the early 20th century when grandfather Mr. Justice Chandrasekhar Datta Chaudhary befriends Leonel Transfern at London. And when Thamma, who was born in 1902 in Dhaka, so we'll come to the grandmother. Thamma, who was born in 1902 in Dhaka. At that time, Dhaka was in British India, and in her childhood, Thamma experiences the split of her house caused by the quarrel of her father and her uncle Jet Moshe. So Thamma has witnessed the quarrel in the family. Her father and her uncle got separated. Her father and her uncle Jet Moshe. After their marriages, both sisters lose contacts with Jet Moshe. Both the sister means Maya Devi and Thamma. They lost their contact with their uncle Jet Moshe. Thamma, the narrator's grandmother, follows her husband as he used to work on the railroad. So, what was Thamma's husband's job? He was working in a railroad. Unfortunately, she loses her husband in 1936. Thamma loses her husband. But without losing the courage, she refuses to accept the help of any sort from her family. So she wants to live independently. She did not accept any help from the family, and to live a good life, to survive by her own, she started teaching. So she started a job of teaching, and being a teacher, she grows her child, the narrator's father. Inspired her interest in the terrorist movement against British, she could not do it. She was very much interested in the activities against the British government, but because of her responsibilities and she was alone, she was the only breadwinner of the family, and because of that, she could not take part in the what we could say Indian freedom movement, and she never returns to Dhaka since it becomes the capital of Muslim country East Pakistan. Because after the partition, Dhaka becomes the capital of East Pakistan, and then it becomes Bangladesh. Everyone knows it. Later, narrator's father marries the narrator's mother, and narrator is there, the son. Narrator's aunt Maya Devi marries with the Sahib. Now we'll come to her sister, Maya Devi. So Thamma's husband, he was working in a railroad, and he dies, and Thamma is alone handling the family, handling the responsibilities. On the other hand, her sister Maya Devi marries with Sahib. Sahib is a son of Justice Datta Chaudhary. He was a diplomat, he was a very wealthy person. And in 1939, there was a medical emergency. He ends up needing a special operation, and that cannot be performed in India. Sahib, the husband of Maya Devi, diagnosed with the serious issue, and that operation cannot be performed in India. So Mrs. Price, Lionel Transfon's daughter, invites Sahib and his family to live with her in London so that they can get the medical attention. And Tridip, at that time, Tridip was a very young boy. Tridip, Maya Devi's second son, who is 9 year old at that time. He was 9 year old boy, and he accompanies his father. Who that child Tridip goes with his mother and father to get the medical treatment for his father in London. But his brother Jatin, already I told you, Maya Devi has a three sons, Tridip, Jatin, and Robi. So Tridip goes to London, and Jatin lives in India. Jatin stays in school in India. Tridip loves London and fascinated by the life of Mrs. Price, brothers, and their friends. And in the time leading up to World War II, when Tridip was in London, at that time the Second World War was going on. Tridip spent his days exploring bomb sites and listening to the snipes. Mrs. Price's husband, who tells stories, in 1940, a bomb hits Alan's house on Brick Lane, and in that, Tridip's friend lost his life, the friend from London. And later, Tridip and May involved with each other even after living in a different place, because Tridip was living in a London, and at that time, uh, uh, the relationship between May and Tridip strengthens in that state. And now, after the medical attention, after the operation, Sahib and his wife Maya Devi came to India. But even after coming to India, May and Tridip, they were in contact. They were writing letters to each other. Over the next decade, Maya Devi gives birth to her third son, Robi, because that time Robi was not there. And after a decade, Maya Devi has given birth to Robi, the third son. Jatin, brother of Tridip, marries a woman affectionately known as Queen Victoria. Jatin, who was living in India, who stays in school in India, he marries with a woman named Queen Victoria, and the couple has a daughter named Ela. So Jatin and Queen Victoria, they have a daughter called Ela, who is of narrator's age. From his childhood, the narrator feels his one-sided attraction for Ela. So narrator has a one-sided attraction for his cousin Ela. Though there is a much gap between them. Ela's parents are wealthy, and she spends her childhood traveling around the world because her father was working in a very good firm. So she has lived a wealthy life, happy life. Tridip, on the other hand, Tridip, who is Ela's uncle, teaches the narrator to use his imagination. Tridip teaches to narrator to use his imagination and explain that world in one's imagination can be just as real as outside world. So imagination has that power. So we can experience the same that is outside in the world. So Tridip was telling him the importance of the imagination, how powerful imagination is. But her cousin Ela does not understand this and disagrees with her uncle's statement about the imagination. Then the novel opens to the one more fold, and already I told you narrator has an attraction for his cousin Ela. For a time, Ela's family lives with Prizes in London. So they used to live in London. In her 8 year of age, her family visits Calcutta for festival. So Jatin and his family, they used to visit Calcutta for the festivals. The narrator insists. He asks his grandmother Thamma with her full family to accompany Ela's family to their home in Rai Bajar. But he feels back from London. Ela decides to play a game called Houses. And when she comes back for the festival, she used to play the game called Houses. And when she plays with Nick in London, she used to play the same game with the Nick in London. She informs the narrator of who Nick is. She talks about Nick and how their friendship is. And the narrator understands that Nick is his enemy, or we could say the competitor, because Ela has an attraction for Nick. And when she was telling a story, Ela starts to cry, and the narrator feels angry for her crying over imaginary event. But when Tridib informs narrator that it was not imagination of Ela, it was a real incident happened with Ela in the London, because she was what we call say scolded, being a Indian, on the basis of racial discrimination. She was scolded in the school, and because of that she was not feeling well. At that time she was thinking that the Nick will help her, but Nick did not help her, and because of that she is crying. She is remembering that incident. As the novel develops, there is a silent love story between the Tridib and May Price. In 1959, Tridib and May, these two characters, who is 19 at the time, 19 years old, young boy and young girl, begin writing for each other. So they were exchanging the letters. At that time, there were no phones or something like WhatsApp and social medias. So they used to write letter. They exchange photos after a year, and through the post they exchange their photographs, passports. In 1963, after 2-3 years, Tridib sends May a very long letter expressing his wish to meet her as the two young people meet. So Tridib in his letter expresses his wish to meet May as a young boy, as a suitor, as her beloved. He has the ideas of love from the movies he has seen, from the English movies. And when May read that letter, she is a bit upset, she is nervous, but she plans to visit Tridib in India. And finally, she decides to come India to visit, to meet her beloved Tridib, and accordingly visits India and also accompanies Tridib to Dhaka. She comes to India, and as well as they goes to Dhaka. Dhaka is their ancestral city, their mother's ancestral city. And they visits Dhaka also. But we know that at that time Dhaka was experiencing communal riots and fights, and there was very much what we call fights were going on. The partition movement, the freedom movement of Bangladesh was going on, East Pakistan at that time. And then the novel turns to the communal violence, and that effect was very horrible. The people were experiencing a horror. As if you have studied the Kushwant Singh's train to Pakistan, you could understand the scale of the horror. And at that time, the Thamma, narrator's grandmother, who is retired and has time on her hands, gets news that her uncle Jet Moshai, who is in his 90s, lives in Dhaka. And she is retired from her job of teaching. And she came to know that her uncle Jet Moshai, who got separated in their young age, he is now in his 90s. Now he's a very oldish person, and he is living in a Dhaka. So Thamma came to know that her uncle is living in Dhaka alone, and he is in his 90s. And she believes that it's her duty to bring her uncle from the growing unrest of the Muslim majority city Dhaka to India. And Thamma feels that she should bring her uncle Jet Moshai to India because there is so much political unrest in Dhaka and there is a Muslim majority, and he might be not able to live very happily, very properly. And being a young lady, being a responsible lady, she decides to bring her uncle to India. Coincidentally, after some days, the news of Sahib receives a job posting to Dhaka. And after a few days, one news came that the Sahib has got the posting in Dhaka. Sahib means Maya Devi's husband. And he moves there with Maya Devi and Ruby. And to discharge his duties, Sahib moves to Dhaka with his wife Maya Devi and their third son, Ruby. According to the invitation of Maya Devi invited Thamma and these children. She invited on January 4th in 1964. Thamma, along with Tridip and May, reached Dhaka to bring her uncle to India. And finally, these three characters, Thamma, Tridip, and May, reached to Dhaka to bring their uncle to India, their uncle Jet Moshai. Maya Devi with 13 years old Robi. Maya Devi with 13 years old Robi accompanies them to the old house in Dhaka. So Robi is there with them. A Muslim mechanic. Now there is another character. A Muslim mechanic Saifuddin informs them. That mechanic informs them to whom? Thamma informs them that a rickshaw driver called Khalil, another character, who lives in the old house and takes care of Jet Moshai. When Thamma asked about the Jet Moshai, the mechanic, Muslim mechanic Saifuddin, told her that one driver, rickshaw driver Khalil, is taking care of your uncle Jet Moshai. Unfortunately, while bringing Jet Moshai to Maya Devi's home, because Maya Devi, her husband, posted in Dhaka. So Thamma was bringing her uncle to Maya Devi's home in Dhaka. The incident happened. Angry mob surrounded the car of Thamma and rickshaw of Khalil. As May tries to get out of the car to save Jet Moshai, Tridip himself gets down. And in that situation, Tridip gets down to save the family from the mob, angry mob. That mob, considering the narrator's attachment with Tridip's parents, he do not open. And before that, the tribe Tridip himself gets down, but Tridip, Jet Moshai, and Khalil are brutally murdered by the mob. Tridip Khalil and Jetmoshai, these three characters are killed by the angry mob. And Tridib was so much attached with the narrator, and because of that, the news of Tridib's death did not reveal to the narrator. Narrator didn't know about the death of Tridib. After some days, they tell him that Tridib died in a communal riot. He finds May and Roby feeling guilty for the death of whom? For the death of Tridib Jetmushai. But in the end, while telling the story to narrator, she relieves from the guilt that she is not responsible for this. And finally, May has revealed the truth to narrator that how Tridib was killed by angry mob. And simultaneously, the narrator experiences communal violence in Calcutta. Some days later, Thamma, narrator's grandmother, goes to Dhaka. The narrator gets the experiences of horrible bus ride where the bus driver tries to save the passenger. Even at the other hand, narrator experienced the communal rights. And as the impact of communal violence, she means Amma gives her beloved gold chain away to fund the war with Pakistan and appears crazy to the narrator. So, to help the war, Thamma has given her beloved gold chain to the fund. Then narrator finds his growing interest in Ela in London. Now already I told you. But she never understands narrator's love for her. She also disliked the narrator's interest in Tridib's stories and their childhood memories as antics. And when Ela comes to India, Ela comes for a holiday and she wants to enjoy nightclub. But at that time in Indian culture, it was not that much accessible for the girls to go to the nightclubs and enjoy nightlife. And she was denied to go to the nightclub. And the same thing, narrator informs to her grandmother. And after listening this wish of Ela to go to the nightclub, Thamma makes her extremely angry. She dislikes Ela's concept of freedom. And in her anger, she writes a letter to the dean of narrator school that the day before she dies, telling that the dean, she was telling in that letter, that narrator visits prostitutes and should therefore be expelled. So she did not like the behavior or the idea of freedom of Ela. So she wants to keep the narrator separate from the ideas of Ela. When the narrator goes on pursue an advanced degree in London, he realizes that Ela has a great attraction for Nick. So Ela has narrator has an attraction for Ela and Ela has an attraction for Nick. But Ela is in love with Nick and finally she marries with Nick. But Nick misuses Ela, he misuses her money. Still, Ela marries with Nick and gets defrauded by Nick. But she continues her relation with Nick as she loves him and bears his disloyalty. But still, she continues her love for Nick. She is handling her family, she is balancing her family. She understood that Nick is not loyal. The novel develops with the various references of communal violence. Already I told you the partition movement, India-China war, communal rights in Dhaka, freedom struggle of Bangladesh, East Pakistan, as well as social uproar from Assam, Northeast Punjab, Sri Lanka, Tripura. Various communal violences has been portrayed in the novel. While taking education in Delhi, once the narrator come across information of the communal riots and violence when he was studying in Delhi, and he came to know about the communal violence that is going on in the society. After seeing a lecture in Delhi, when he attended a lecture, the narrator realizes that although he is never connected to the events as a child, the riots he experienced in Calcutta and the riots that killed Tridip in Dhaka were the parts of the same political uproar. So this political uproar, this unrest is there equally over all India. And he was studying the Atlas, the Tridip's Atlas. And narrator discovers that the borders are meaningless. And when he was studying Atlas, he came to know, he understood that these borders are meaningless. Why these borders? The borders of the nations. These are meaningless. Why? Because these borders had created a climate of partition or the climates of riot. So the narrator feels that because of this border, this communal rights or the political unrest is happening. If there were no borders, there won't be an idea of nation or there won't be idea of something my own. So he says that these borders are meaningless. Because of this border, these riots are happening. Because of these borders, Tridib, Khalil and Jet Moshai killed. The novel is divided into two parts. One is going away and coming home. Going away and coming. The first part describes the disturbances in the family that creates a borderline between them. So first of all, I told you that the Thamma's father and his brother, they got separated and their families got separated and they were living alone, separately. And they were handling their own families, they were handling their responsibilities. Then there is a description of departure between two sisters, Maya Devi and Thamma. Maya Devi is leaving country. She was living with the Sahib, Datta Chaudhary's son. Thamma going away from Dhaka. Thamma was also doing a teaching job. She was handling her own responsibilities. Separation of the house because of the death of grandfather of the both sisters. Why these sisters got separated? Because of the death of their grandfather. Thamma's rejection of help from anyone after losing her husband, her hardship. Because when her husband dies, when Thamma's husband dies, she did not ask for help. Even she did not accept any help from anyone. She stand alone. And she rejected help. In the second part, the narrator narrates Thamma's life after retirement. Both sisters' sincere efforts to bring their uncle Jet Moshai to Calcutta, in which they get failure. And after the retirement, after that, we have seen how the novel progresses. And after the retirement, in the old age, these both sisters Maya Devi, because Maya Devi's husband was posted in Dhaka, so she was already in the Dhaka. Maya Devi and Thamma, they were trying to save their uncle who got separated long ago. But their sincere efforts to bring their uncle Jet Moshe in Calcutta, it's a failure. Because their uncle Tridib and Khalil killed in a riot, that angry mob killed them. The second part displays illusion of borders that the politicians created. The borders, but these borders cannot separate the minds of the people. In the second part, we have seen how these political leaders, they have created a kind of a border for their benefit, and these borders are very harmful. They are meaningless because of these borders. These communal riots and fights are happening between the people are killing to each other, but these borders cannot separate the minds of the people. Understand, these borders can separate us geographically, separate us administratively. We will give the different identities of Bangladeshis or Pakistanis or Indians or whatever, but they cannot separate the minds of the people. And it is very important, because after all, human being always feel that the humanity is the best way to survive, to live, because only on the basis of humanity we can progress in our life, we can develop our lives. So in short, the novelist Amitav Ghosh in the second part shows us, tells us that these borders, the geographical borders, can separate us, but the minds of the people. But in the mind, we are together. Being a Indian, we can take the example of India. The people from different religion, different caste, creed live together in India. Why? Because we are not separated by our minds. We are together. After all, we know that we are all Indians. It's okay. Even we have friends outside the world, outside the nation. We have friends in abroad and in different countries. It means there are the geographical borders, but it doesn't mean that we are separated by it. So we are together. So this was the analysis of the novel. And then we'll move to the themes. What are the different themes? In this novel, the writer has explored the different themes, the borders, the idea of border, which is meaningless according to writer. Then violence, we have experienced the violence, how these people killed, how parallelly the narrator experienced the communal riots and the violence in Calcutta. So he said this is the same political uproar everywhere. The political unrest is there. The East Pakistan people, they are fighting for their freedom. Bangladesh movement, partition movement, India China war. The people from Assam, they are fighting for their region. Then partition, India Pakistan partition, communal rights, so many people killed. You can experience it through the novel of Kushwant Singh, Train to Pakistan. Then identity crisis. in this situation, everyone is finding out their identity, who I am. So identity crisis is there. Everyone is fighting for their identity, the nation's identity, the region's identity. Then there is a spirit of nationalism, because when there is a partition, it means there is an idea of nationalism in everyone's mind. So everyone is fighting for their idea of nation. Then, of course, there is a communal violence. We have seen that how my Thamma lost her uncle and Tridib and Khalil, that innocent man, in the angry mob, in that communal mob. Then this is the last theme is the novel of memories. We have seen that how the narrator unfolded the memories of different characters and memories that he lived in his life. So this is a novel of memories, and he unfolded the different memories. So these are the themes explored by the writer in the novel called The Shadow Lines by Amitav Ghosh. Thank you. I hope everyone understood it. Yes, sir, I'm done.
Yeah. So, yeah. To Deokate, sir.
Yeah.
Sir started with the background topics, introduced us to the background topics in short, gave us the biography of the writer Amitav Ghosh, and then moved on to the novel, The Shadow Lines. He has covered the themes and he critically analyzed the novel and covered the themes along with the introduction to the characters as well. So that will be a big help to the students, I'm sure. And on behalf of the organizers, I thank Mr. Ajay that he spared this morning hours for us and made a presentation in this session. So thanks again, Ajay sir. And the session.
Yes, sir. I extend my heartfelt thanks for inviting me. Special thanks to you, Dr. Kapil Singhal sir, Dr. Karthik Panikar, the principals of the organizing coalition.
Yeah, always welcome, Ajay. We all are a team. No problem.
Yeah.
Okay.